Hello, my name is Hunter Bates, and today I will be discussing and summarizing my final paper. Now, first off, my paper is on the social learning theory, and when I started off my paper, I talked a little bit about the elements that I had chosen of the social learning theory, and I chose to focus mostly on children and kind of into young adults because I just kind of wanted to display the progress in the development and change in age in social learning theory as a child grows up and becomes an adult and kind of finds themselves a little bit. And me being a young adult myself, I found this very interesting because I'm still, using my environment and my surroundings and such to affect me and to kind of discover who I am as a person. So that's why I pretty much chose it. I also kind of wanted to focus on kind of the negative behaviors as well and kind of look at every side that I could of the social learning theory within my interests, of course. The first article I chose that I really kind of captured my attention and was the one that made me kind of secure in my decision to do social learning theory was a article called Social Learning Theory is Young Children's Persuasion in Today Conversations. And it kind of talked a little bit and did a study on 3 children ranging from ages 3 years old to 5 years old and had them sit down with their parents and have just everyday conversations. And within these everyday conversations, they monitored what tactics the child used and what behaviors and such the child used in persuasion and whether or not the child initiated the persuasion or the parent did. And they found that the child was more likely to initiate the persuasion and feed off the parent emotion. I also found it interesting that they found that not only were the children more likely to initiate a persuasive argument, but also that the child, when feeding on the parent's emotions, used 6 out of the 14 tactics that are made and created for this experiment and for the social learning theory. And I thought that was really interesting. And that kind of tied me into my next paper. I kind of wanted to my next argument. I just kind of wanted to focus on different parts of the paper. And my next one was a article that featured 174 children ranging from ages 4 to 6 years old in urban areas. And this study looked more at how the parents and the child's relationship was with social learning theory and how the parents' behavior with social learning theory being known changed. For example, how if a parent knows about social learning theory, how they will choose to not cuss in front of their child or choose to not do certain behaviors in front of their child knowing that this could affect the child in the future. So they chose not to partake in those certain behaviors. And that was basically what that one mostly was about. It was just kind of informational and kind of studied how the parents did change and how the educators of the children did change once they found out about social learning theory. Now my next one kind of takes a little bit of a dark side. It was focused in Oregon and it was focused on children with behavioral issues, unsocial children that came from troubled homes, and it studied them and their behaviors with other children because these children were kind of condoned as not proper model children to be playmates. No kids wanted to play with them. They were in school alone. They acted out. They used offensive language and put themselves and other children in harm's way. And they were just very aggressive children. And they kind of studied these behaviors and looked into the children's homes to see where that was coming from. And the sad part about this is from their studies, what they gathered was that this behavior went unnoticed by the parents. And the reason ultimately that these behaviors went unnoticed is because in that home, that was a norm because the parents interacted with each other aggressively or the parents interacted with their child aggressively or, strong language was used, abuse was used, angry behaviors were used. So the parents didn't really notice that their children were acting out in this way because it was a norm. And that was what was basically found about that study. And I thought that to be kind of sad, but very interesting, and how these parents really rubbed off on these kids and how it made them to be aggressive. And I thought that that was a helpful study, because hopefully these children can get help, because, I mean, nobody wanted to play with them because they knew they were just bad kids. The next article I chose just kind of tied this portion of my paper all together. It wasn't really a study done on subjects, but rather just a bunch of different studies and information brought together through the research of someone. They put it together, kind of did that research for me and made it kind of easy, and I just went to one place, one-stop shop, to kind of confirm the whole children and cultures and how the development of children is affected by their cultures and their environment. And it kind of just backed up my argument, rather, of the whole social learning theory within my paper. So I chose that article just for that main purpose, not because it was rather a study. And then I kind of chose to go on to the young adult portion of the social learning, and I looked at college students, rather, that were from different classes and how they use nagging and different persuasive tactics to get to their educators. And this was done on 189 college students. And these college students, now that they've gotten older, they're no longer children, obviously, they used 14 out of the 14 tactics to kind of get what they want and persuade. And whether it be with the teacher on anything as simple as a grade, or with another peer on, hey, can I look at your paper? It was little things like that with persuasion, that the different tactics that were looked at. And that's why I kind of thought it was useful to start off with on this section of my paper, because it was similar to the younger age group of students and how they used to persuade. So I thought it kind of went with hand in hand, and I thought it was very informal for it. The next part of my paper, I again use something to kind of tie it together. And I found this article that was not based on social learning theory, but it kind of used social learning theory as a tactic for their study. And it was kind of two little bubbles in a model, which was current problem and how behaviors, environment, knowledge, experiences, and such forth tied into the current problem. So I kind of use that again just kind of as a background, just give me more information. And then again, I kind of went to the darker side of things, and I looked at juveniles and crime and how criminals are made from social learning theory, which was the main argument of this article, was that social learning theory is one of the number one theories that create criminals. And reason being is because of the environment they surround. This kind of backs it up, is a criminal is not very likely to, have a high position job, live in a gated community, drive, I don't know, a Benz. Like, they're not going to do that. A criminal is more likely to hang out with other criminals. A criminal is more likely to come from a troubled background. And this kind of tied in with the children that were troubled before, that if they keep going down that path, where they could end up. And I kind of tied into it one of my favorite television shows. When I was just writing this paper, I was like thinking about this was on my mind, but Dexter, and how he witnessed his mother's death and had to sit for 3 days in this crime scene with his dead mother, and how that created who he was and the killer that he was. Because he wasn't killing innocent people. He wasn't killing what I suppose would be the bad guys, the people that had did illegal acts, the people that were rapists, the people that were serial killers of the innocent, and he chose to do that because he kind of felt it was a justice to his mother, and in some sick way he had a mental illness and was never able to get help for that. So I kind of tied that in there, as well as kind of to back up the argument of this article, whether or not I agree with this article, but just kind of to back up that argument with the article that I had found. And then I had some other articles that I just threw in there because I found them to be interesting. But in closing, I kind of want to talk about why I chose this and what I plan to do in the future with it. And my major at Hiram is dramatic counseling, and ultimately I would love to work at a rehab facility or a juvenile jail. And I would like to be a counselor for those troubled students. And when I was reading through all the different theories and such that we had learned in class, this one just struck me because I knew this was something that I could potentially use in the future. This is something that I could use for my career, especially working with troubled youth, in order to kind of understand where they come from and how their behaviors were affected. And I mean, that is ultimately why I chose this topic and ultimately what I do plan to do with it in the future, because it definitely helps my major. It definitely helps my future, and that's what interests me about it. So I suppose this is running long, and that's all I have to say, but I would like to thank you for your time.